All right. So when we close read, we are really reading with purpose. And when we do that close read, we're doing 4 things. Okay. When we do that close read, we're doing 4 things. We are questioning. We are commenting. We are forming connections or making connections. And we're identifying vocabulary we don't know or that we think is important. And if we don't know that vocabulary, we're actually going to define it so that we have a better understanding of what we're reading. Now, when we first start doing a close read, when we first start learning this skill, we do each of these pieces separately, or we encourage you to do each of these pieces separately, because we know each one takes a different mindset. Now, if you're comfortable questioning and doing all of it together, give that a shot. But the way we're going to walk through today is we're going to focus on questioning first, then we're going to go back and do some commenting and connecting. Now, we're also going to recognize that as we're questioning, we might be identifying vocabulary we need to define, or that we think is important. So once we first start to work on that close read, this beginning skill, we really ask you to do it in 5 steps. Okay? We really ask you to do it in 5 steps. We ask you to read it all the way through first. It's really important to read something fully before we start pulling it apart, because that is a way for us to get an overall idea. Now, if you've never read something and you're reading it for the first time, we call that a cold read. First time you're reading it, no experience with it, cold read. Then we ask you to read it again and start close reading with questions. Now, when I start doing this, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I'm really going to dig deep and I'm going to ask a zillion questions. You don't necessarily have to ask all those questions. You may not have those questions. But as I walk through, I'm going to ask the questions that I have in my head. Okay? Some of them may turn out to be comments later, but I'm going to start off walking you through my thought process as if you were in my head while I was reading this. Then I'm going to read it again and I'm going to comment and connect and make connections. It's really easy to do the comments and connections together because they work so well together. And as I said, reading it through for vocab, that usually happens with questioning, because usually that's when we're like, what does that word mean? And boom, you've just identified vocabulary that you need. All right. So we're going to start off with step 1, reading the piece all the way through. For the class, we're going to start with do not go gentle into that good night. Now, later on, you're going to get your own piece that you are going to work with. Okay. We're going to use the comment feature on Google. So whether you're familiar with it or not, I'm also going to be showing you how to do that, which you can use for close reading, for peer editing, for any number of things. Okay. So do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieve it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my Father, here on the sad height, curse, bless me now, with your fierce tears I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So I've read it through first. This is my cold read. I'm going to go through it again, but now I'm going to start asking questions. Okay, now I'm going to start asking questions. Okay. All right, here we go. I'm going to start digging in with questions. Don't be intimidated by the number of questions I'm asking because we're going to work on this together. And I'm just going to take you through a thought process. And my thought process might be, or actually will be, different than yours. So here we go. Do not go gentle into that good night. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at good night. What does he mean by good night? Is it saying goodbye? Is it the end of a day? Is it death? What does he mean? Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage against the dying of the light. So I'm looking at rage. And I'm thinking, why is he angry at the close of a day? What's that all about? Dying of the light. Is he talking about night? Is he talking about winter coming? Because, dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right. Why is dark right? What's he meaning there? Why is dark right? Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. All right, so why does he keep repeating this? Repeating this line. What's going on with that? Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Frail deeds. Why are their deeds frail? Frail. What does frail mean here? So in this question, when I'm asking what does frail mean here, I'm also actually identifying vocab that I might need, that I'll have to go back and I'll have to define. Might have danced in a green bay. Deeds dancing in a bay. What are deeds dancing in a green bay? What does he mean by that? Rage against the dying of the light. So here's another, why does he keep repeating this? This line repeated. Wild men. Who does he mean by wild men? Who are wild men? Who are wild men? Who caught and sang the sun in flight. Caught and sang the sun in flight. Are we talking about airmen? How do you catch and sing the sun? And learn too late, they grieve it on its way. What are they grieving? What are they grieving? What are they grieving? Are they grieving the sun? What does he mean by that? Do not go gentle into that good night. Again, we're repeating that line. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Now, does he mean that when people are close to death, they tend to see loved ones who have already died? Is that what he's referring to? They're raging against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. So is he specifically talking to his father? Is the audience specifically his father? And then, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So, is he talking about fighting death? Interesting. All right. So I've gone through and I've questioned. I'm going to pause the recording now so we can talk about the question. All right. So, like I said, we're going to make some comments now. Some of them will connect to questions I've asked. Some of them won't. So, do not go gentle into that good night. Well, I definitely have some commenting here. We're definitely going to edit this to comment. Comment and connect. Like closing a good book when you're finished. You don't want it to end, or the end of a great day you want to last forever. And I'm thinking Scotland. I had some really great days in Scotland on vacation, so I'm going to save that. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. So we are yelling at the ending of something. See comment above. That's just going to add to that comment right there. Rage against the dying of the light. The wise men know their end is at their end that dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning. So I'm connecting that to wise men who thought they were wise, but didn't really make a difference. So I'm connecting that to forked lightning. Forked lightning, meaning making a mark on something, and they didn't. Okay, do not go gentle into their good night. They're fighting that. So after reading this, why does he repeat this line? I'm gonna make a connection here. Okay, comment or connection. He's fighting the end of something. That good night. He's fighting the end of something. Good men, the last wave by. The last wave by. I'm thinking, when I hear wave, I'm thinking a wave of infantry, maybe in war. And I question mark that because that's where I'm going with it. But then when I connect it to Danston of Green Bay, I'm thinking World War II. I'm thinking Normandy. Okay. I'm thinking Yoda. Wars not make one great, which I think equals the frail deeds, because frail means weak deeds. They're weak deeds. So I think he's making a comment. Well, maybe I'm connecting it to a comment on war, and wars not make one great. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight. So I suggested airmen in my first question. How do you catch and sing the sun? But I'm also thinking of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun and fell. If anybody's familiar with that particular green myth, Icarus and his father made wings of wax so they could fly. And Icarus was warned, don't go too close to the sun because it'll melt the wax and then you'll fall. But Icarus was just too caught up in flying and just having fun that he flew too close and his wings melted and he fell. So I think of Icarus who flew too close to the sun and then fell. That seems to work that. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage against the dying of the light. So at this point, when I'm thinking rage, I'm going to comment on it here. Definitely there's an anger. There's an anger at the end of something. Or he's fighting against something like, I'm thinking a raging storm, tornado. I'm thinking tornado. I'm thinking a force of nature. That's what's popping into my head. This is a force of nature. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse me, bless me now, with your fierce tears I pray. So again, this brings in mind a saying goodbye, a farewell. So this is a farewell, a goodbye, something he doesn't want to happen. Okay? And as I'm going through, is he talking about fighting death? And now I'm going to add a comment. I really think he is talking about fighting death. He's fighting to stay alive, or for someone to keep fighting to stay alive. Okay? So as I go through, I'm really looking at all of that. Now, the last piece to this that we would ask you to do is we would ask you to write a summary. Now, when you're writing a summary on a piece this small, you're really looking at 1 to 3 sentences, depending on how you do it, okay? And what you would do is you would reread the poem all along, read through your comments, your questions, and really start using those to put yourself together, to put your ideas together, okay? So if I were going to write a summary on this, I would definitely talk, let's see, what would my summary be? Let's do that then. Summary. There it is. The speaker is trying to convince someone he loves, probably his father, based on the last few lines, to fight death. He convinces him to do this by giving examples of those others who also fought against death. Okay? So there's my 2-sentence summary. The speaker is trying to convince someone he loves, probably his father, based on the last few lines, to fight death. And he convinces him to do this by giving examples of those others who also fought against death. Now, one thing that I notice is he doesn't ever say if these men are successful in buying more time. And I find that interesting as well. So that makes me want to go look into the poem and into the poet a little bit more to see whatever happened with this. Okay? So this in a nutshell is your close reading, or what you probably called last year, annotation. And thanks guys for telling me that that's what it was called last year. That really helps, right? Let's pause this.